Hey guys, welcome back to Heart Breathings. We have been discussing over the last couple of videos some of my top tips and advice for self-publishers that I have learned and sometimes learned the hard way over the course of the last 8 years. And so today we are on to tip number 3, which is think long term. So this is another one of those kinds of tips that I learned the hard way, but that is one of the absolute most important things that I have learned is, this business moves incredibly fast. There are people who, some people you will see will write a book every 2 weeks or be publishing a book every 2 weeks. Algorithms change. Trends change. What works one week doesn't work the next week. Everybody will say, everybody's got to have a newsletter. And then before you know it, there's like 50,000 people doing Kindle giveaways to get people on their newsletter. And then now no one opens newsletters anymore. So it's kind of one of those businesses, like I was talking about in our last video, don't take things for granted. It's one of those businesses where things are changing rapidly. So what I find is that a lot of people tend to focus then on things that work short term. So they focus on, okay, right now, this is the big thing is everybody's trying this one thing. And if you run this kind of ad along with this little hack, you can get 50 extra sales. Or if you gift yourself 50 copies on Amazon, then it'll boost your ranking, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's fine to try things that work short term, like little tactics or little boosts and all that kind of stuff. Like, go for it. As long as it's not breaking terms of service, you're not really getting yourself in danger by trying some of these little things that work. So, go for it. But one of the worst things that you can do for your indie career is to focus solely on things that work in the short term, because what you're going to end up doing is like basically giving yourself whiplash because you're like trying this and then that and then this and then that. And then you're going to have to be basically changing your strategy and the way you run your career every few weeks or months because what works today doesn't work tomorrow. A much more stress-free, joyful way to run your career is to really focus on things that are going to be moving you toward your long-term vision for your life rather than things that like make a quick buck today or things that work now that are not going to be working tomorrow. So in the last video, I touched on like how when KDP Select first came out, there was a thing where they would allow you, if you were exclusive to Amazon, to run a few free days on your book. And this is still something that is there, but the system used to be a little bit different because there was no Kindle Unlimited. And what people found is that if you ran a free day and you got your book, let's say 50,000 downloads on your book that day, then when the book went back to paid, your ranking would zip way up the chart as if you had sold like 50,000 books. It wasn't quite like 1-to-1 like that, but let's say it would act as if you had sold 5,000 books. So you could come off of a very successful run giving your book away for free and hit the top 100 on Amazon. And this was something that people, indies, as a community, were always looking for little things that work quickly. And, that was a great thing. It actually launched people's careers when they followed that tactic. But if you're going to follow stuff like that, you have to know that it's something short term. Like most of us could see very easily that like this is going to be something that works for a few months or maybe for a year. And then it's going to change because things like this just always change. So that's part of what I was talking about in the last video. You can't take anything for granted, including tactics or, any of that kind of stuff. So what you need to be doing, in my opinion, is really thinking long term, because otherwise where you get into trouble, and this is something that I experienced and I've talked about on this channel before, is that if you're just thinking about the here and now or just this year or just what's going on, in the past 6 months or whatever, you're going to be making decisions that might be very difficult to get out of, to, rearrange, to recover from for years to come. So, for example, from my own career, I started out writing one series and that served me really well. It built up my readership. It built up a lot of loyalty. It built up a lot of sales and a lot of momentum. But when that series was done, I started a new series and then another new series and then another new series. And to the point where I didn't even realize it because I was really just kind of following my passion of like, oh, I really want to write this. And after six books or 2 years of writing the same series, I was ready for something new. So instead of thinking long term about how am I going to get so many books out in so many different series at a reasonable rate, I was just focused on this is what I really want to write. And then when that book was done, instead of coming up with a long-term strategy, I was like, oh, but I really want to write this and I really want to write this. It's very shiny object syndrome. And I wasn't thinking about how that might affect me long-term. Not only switching genres and building up different reader bases and how that might fracture my brand. I didn't think about that. All I was thinking about was, ooh, I want to write this. I also wasn't thinking about how difficult it would be to keep up with multiple series, especially as someone who typically was only writing about 2 books a year. If you've got 5 series going and you can only write 2 books a year, that means only 1 book per series every couple of years. And that's just not the best way to run an indie career. So I shot myself in the foot with that. And so when I started really understanding how that was affecting my income, how it was affecting my joy and my stress levels, because every time I would release a new book, people would say, oh, well, that's great, but where's this other one we've been waiting for 2 years? And so it was like, even when I had that accomplishment of finishing a new book, there was still that guilt and that pressure of like, oh yeah, but now I'm way behind on this other series. And I just don't want to be in that place anymore. So when I started 2018 this year, I decided, enough of this. I had 5 series going at the beginning of this year, and I just decided, okay, I am going to work my butt off for the next few years to finish out those series so that I can get back to a focused long-term strategy. But even though I wrote and published 5 books and I'm writing my 6th book, which makes this by far my most productive year of all time, I still have 5 books to write to get out from under the series that I was writing. Now, everything I'm writing is something that I want to be writing, but it's just understanding that when you start a series, you're committing potentially to years of writing something, or at least hundreds of thousands of words, depending on how long it takes you to write that. And it's very difficult to abandon series without upsetting your fans or losing fans. And it's very difficult emotionally to abandon a series that you loved to write. So when you make these decisions, when it comes to, what books you're going to write, what strategies you're going to follow, what genre you're going to write, what your branding's going to be, I would highly, highly, highly recommend to you that you think about how it's going to affect you long term. Don't just think about how, oh, this will bring in a lot of money right now, or this is really what I want to write right now and that'll be awesome. Before you start publishing stuff and you start down that road of like committing to a series or committing to a genre or, putting yourself out there as a certain type of brand or whatever, I really hope that you will take a minute to think about where you're going, where you want to go, what your long-term vision for your life is, and whether or not this decision moves you further toward that. Now, this is something, again, we talk about a lot in my 3-day boot camp. If you guys are interested, I will put a link down below because that boot camp will be opening up again in December, and there will be limited slots available for that. So if you're interested in joining the boot camp on how to set your goals for, 90 days to start off the year great in 2019, I will put that link and you can join my waiting list. But we talk about that a lot in the class, which is basically, think about what it is you want out of your life. Like, what is truly your long-term goal? Because we could fill this room with, 50 people, and every single person would have a slightly nuanced, different goal. Now, maybe we would all want to write, if we were all writers, we might all want to write full time or make money writing, but the nuance of what we want to write and how often we want to work and how many books we want to write per year and how we want to interact with our fans, all of that stuff is going to be very different. It's going to be very individual to you. Some people care less about what they're writing and more about the experience of, making money and, having a community. Or as long as it's romance, I don't really care what subgenre. Other writers are going to say, no, it has to be this. Like, if I'm not writing cowboys, I'm not going to be happy. And so it's important to know what your thing is. What is it you're trying to go for in your life? What's your long-term vision? And then every single choice you make, think of how it's going to affect you in the long term. Don't just think, well, this is going to make me money right now, even though it might. And maybe that would be super exciting, but think about, how does that affect you? Okay, yeah, I really, really want to write this new cowboy series, but you have to think, okay, if I take the time to write this, what am I giving up? Oh yeah, I'm giving up the time to finish out this other series that's doing really well. And how is that going to affect me long term? So instead of just thinking about how things affect you right now or what you really want right now, start looking to the future and pulling out a calendar and saying, okay, but how, if I write this now, what does that do to my current series? And how long does it mean that's going to be until that gets finished? If I start 2 new series this year and then, I get pregnant because we've been trying to have a baby, then how am I going to finish all 3 of those series or keep up with that? There's just lots of little things like that that you need to really at least have in the back of your mind and be thinking about long term. There are so many people out there that are focused 100% on the short term. And there are people teaching courses. There are people in Facebook groups. There are authors here on YouTube that are teaching you how to short term, here's how you can make money, here's how you can market. And a lot of that stuff, is valuable, but it's also, you have to understand that that is like a snapshot in time. Those are things that are going to move you a tiny bit forward right now. And then 6 months from now, the entire system is going to change. So if you're not focused on how your decisions that you're making right now affect you in the long term, you could potentially be doing stuff that is not only going to not move you forward toward your dreams, but is actually going to be extremely detrimental to you. So think of it this way too. Like, you try a tactic that makes your fans angry, but hey, it made you a hell of a lot of money. Where's that getting you in the long term? Also, you write a genre that is super, super trendy and it might make you a lot of money right now for the next 6 months, but where does that move you toward your long-term vision for your life when that trend changes? Are you building up, if you write 5 books this year, all in a genre that you don't really like, how is that moving you toward the ideal life of your dreams? It might make you money in the short term, but short term is not going to bring you joy, and it's not going to bring you closer to that ideal life. And hopefully you want to move closer to that ideal. And sometimes it can be very difficult to make those decisions because we want the success, we want the money. And sometimes you can make excuses like, well, if I don't make money doing this trendy genre, then I'm not going to be able to publish over here. But what you're not thinking about is how taking those 6 months to write a genre that you don't necessarily like, that's trendy for a short period of time and it's only going to bring in so much money for so long, is going to affect your whole career, your brand, your happiness, your joy of writing, or time away from this other series that you were building. How much are you sacrificing in order to make money in the short term? And I'm not saying this to be judgmental because, we all follow our own paths, and some people, love writing to trends and that's what you want to do. And I have nothing against it. Some people love, following the latest marketing strategies, and it's like a game and it's really fun to them and it's an enjoyable part of the process. But it's not a judgment thing. It's just an urging you to really think about what choices, like every single choice you make, how it's going to affect you in the long term, rather than just saying, I have a need to make more money, so therefore I'm going to jump on these 5 things that someone else told me to do, without thinking of how that could affect my brand, or how it could affect my joy, or how it could affect my other series that I'm writing, or whatever. Because it can be very difficult and very time consuming to dig yourself out of some of those holes. So if I had not, started 5 different series, then, maybe my income would be way up this year because I wasn't trying to finish things out and having to put 6 months between books in a series. If I had not started so many different series, maybe I would be moving on to something else already that might have been more popular, or, you don't really know. But what you do know is that, I know that if I had been more intentional and I had really looked at a calendar and said, how am I going to keep up with all these series? I never would have started so many, because I know that part of being a successful indie publisher is getting books out in a series as quickly as possible and writing them to the best of my ability. And when I've got so many series going on, even if I wrote 5 books in a year, it would only be 1 book per series per year. And that's just not the best long-term way to build up new fans or to build up my income. So it's just situation that I'm in right now, that I'm digging myself out of that hole, because I'm not going to abandon these series because I love them. I just know that now I have to really, before I make a decision about what series comes next or what I'm going to commit to with my fans, I really have to think about how it's going to affect me long term. And, one of the things that I'm coming across, now that I'm thinking about next year and being done with all of these series and what comes next is, there's a series that I really, really want to write, and it's young adult, but it's moving more into dystopian and science fiction than it is the fantasy and witches that I typically write. So even though I really, really want to write that, I have to also think how it's going to affect me long term. Is this a leap that I want to make? Are my fans going to follow me? Is it worth, do I want to write it so much so that I just have to write it and rebuild for the fans that don't follow me to a new genre? Or is it not worth the risk because there's another witches and fantasy type thing that I really, really want to write just as badly? And these are the types of questions that I have to ask myself, and I have to look at it intentionally against my vision for my long-term, my long-term vision for my life. This is just some of the practical advice that I have for you guys, is really think about everything long-term. It can be really easy to listen to people that will tell you, here's how you buy, ghost-written books and get them out there. Or here's how you, if you join this group of authors and we do this, this, and this, it's going to boost you up for this period of time. Every single thing that you decide to do is going to affect your career for the long haul. Your branding, the way people see you, whether fans are loyal to you, how much time you have to write, how many genres you're writing, how many books you're writing. All of these things are going to play a factor in the long-term success of your career. So I just urge you that as you make each decision along the way, instead of just jumping in head first, you really look at how it is going to affect your career long-term. All right, guys, so some difficult truths, but hopefully this is helping you to understand some of the things that I wish I had known when I first started out, and even just a couple of years ago. Some of this is stuff that I really have learned the hard way. Strategy is really and truly one of the most important things that can affect your success. And if you're looking at short-term strategy, you're really missing out on a lot of great opportunities, because the long-term strategies is what can really start to pay off in six-figure income and big ways for your whole career, because this is a building process, and we're going to talk about that in tip number 4 coming in the next couple of days. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified as soon as a new video goes up from me. Here at Heart Breathings, we talk about a lot of things, a lot of tips on self-publishing, as well as organizing and planning for your self-publishing and entrepreneurial career. So I hope that you'll join us here in this community, and don't forget to hit that like button on your way out. All right, guys, I will see you in my next video with tip number 4. Bye.